Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, Senator Beitler, when he was here last year, and I went round and round on this proposal. I'd like to ask the introducer of the bill a question or two.
Senator Avery, would you yield to a question?
I do.
Senator Avery, the last speaker touched on the group of named entities that this would affect. Are public power districts included?
I knew you'd do this. I'm not sure, but I will get that answered for you in the short order.
Okay. Here's what I'm getting to, though, and I thought you might have had it in front of you. That wasn't to be a trick question. The main aim of Senator Beitler was Lincoln. That's why he wanted it. That's why he argued for it. He mentioned some of these others to garner votes, but I had strong objection to including all of these other entities. There would still be the ability for them to handle these funds in the way they currently do if you were to strike them from your proposal and limit it to what is really of concern to you. Now, would you be willing to eliminate school districts? And if public power districts are included on that list, would you be willing to eliminate them also? And just leave the city of whatever class it is that you're interested in?
Actually, I'm interested in all of these. And you're right, public power districts are included, cities, villages, school districts. And the reason for that is that we're not talking about tax money here. We're talking about public endowments. These are private funds or funds that they're generated by the sale of a public entity. And they ought to be able to earn a fair return in the marketplace without being confined just to bonds.
Senator Avery, if we may continue, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to earn money. They could lose money, couldn't they?
They could.
So the argument that more money is going to be earned may be applicable at this point. But are you aware of this problem they're having in what has been called the subprime mortgage lending area?
I'm aware that the market right now is in trouble, but
and a lot of people who thought that was great at the time because they could get these mortgages, the payments were not that high. Some people speculated on real estate because they could get this real estate, they could make a lot of money off it. Then when things turned around and the mortgage payments increased and the value of the property decreased, they are now in a world of trouble. That's an oversimplification. But many people now not only are facing foreclosure on the property they invested in for the purpose of making money, they are in trouble in terms of trying to keep their own homes. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that. But I think we need to keep our eye on the prudent investor principles. A prudent investor would not take risky investments like that.
When the dot-com bubble burst, a lot of investors took a bath in that debacle also. Would you agree?
Yes.
There were some people who invested in that industry, I will call it, who at the time may have been deemed prudent to do so. Would you agree with that?
They thought so at the time.
So the mere fact that at a given point in time something appears prudent, that doesn't mean it actually will pan out to be prudent in the real world.
In all cases that you're right. Here's the point, though. The point is that you have to accept a certain element of risk in order to enhance the return. And you have to rely upon prudent investors, experts in the financial field, to determine what is acceptable risk. Right now, I happen to know that it's not a very good time to be in bonds, nor is it a good time to be in stocks. Now's the time to be in money market funds. A prudent investor would make decisions of that kind.
But does that mean that money market funds are always going to perform as they are performing now?
No.
And are they performing well, standing on their own, or in comparison to others that are not performing well?
In comparison to others. And that's part of the strategy of a prudent investor.
That's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Chambers. Senator Chambers, you are the next light, or we recognize you.
Thank you. Senator Avery, this is not opposition to the entire proposal, but it is opposition to including all these other entities. What is your primary interest?
My primary interest, sir, is to increase the rate of return so that there is more money available for investing in programs in health and other activities such as in North Platte recreational facilities. If you look at the handout that I passed out with a table of numbers, that represents 81 years of data. And while a prudent investor might not take 70% stocks and 30% bonds, the whole point here is that you give them the flexibility to invest in a wide array of diversified portfolio of investment instruments so as to enhance the return. You can't do this without some risk, I admit that. But you have to be willing to accept a certain element of risk in order to enhance return.
Senator Avery, as you pointed out, there are risks, and I will add, and there are risks. This money is not private money. It results from the sale of a public piece of property. Do you agree with that?
It did in Lincoln, but public endowments can involve donations, private donations to municipalities.
When money comes into the hands of a governmental subdivision or agency, that becomes public money. Isn't that true?
It does.
So we're not talking about public-private money now. Whatever form it may have had some other place and at some other time, it now is public money, and all of the public have an interest in that money and how it's handled.
Yes.
When the bill was brought to us by Senator Beitler, there was a specific project. I think it dealt with the sale of a hospital. Is that true?
Yes. It was the sale of Lincoln General Hospital that the city of Lincoln owned and sold to Bryan.
That's a very particularized or individualized focus. And the discussion of these other entities came up when I didn't want to let the bill extend to them. So let me ask you this question. You said that when you're talking about investments, I'm paraphrasing, but I want to get to the idea of it, there are going to be risks involved. And I take that to mean there is no guarantee that the outcome will be what you desire it to be. Is that basically what you mean by risk?
Yes, and that's true even with bonds.
Okay. Now, are you willing to risk everything in your bill on having all of these entities included?
Well, I think that I would prefer that because all of those entities might have opportunities to take advantage of the law or the change in the Constitution.
Now,
and could benefit from it.
Now, Senator Avery, and if this were Senator Carlson's bill, I would have him engaged in this discussion where God was talking to a guy about a city that he's going to destroy, and this person bargained with God. It was almost like an auction. And when this person got the number of people down to where he thought there's got to be this many people at least, and the city saved, well, God knew that wasn't the case, so he's going to be able to destroy it anyway. But nevertheless,
1 minute.
This man was willing to risk everything on that particular bargain. Now, he would say, you want 100, would you destroy the city for the lack of 5? And the answer was no. Would you give up your bill, Senator Avery, if public power districts were to be removed? Are you willing to trade the possibility of getting your bill in order to keep public power districts in? Because they didn't come here asking for this bill.
No, let me tell you something. I believe in compromise. Compromise means to me that in order to get something, I have to give up something. If I have to give up something to get what I want, I'm willing to do it. A compromise means that you leave the table a little bit unhappy, and I leave the table a little bit unhappy, but neither one of us is completely unhappy. That's the nature of a compromise.
I will be disconsolate. I will be unhappy.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And Mr. President, since I seem to be the only one interested in discussing this bill, I will craft an amendment or two to see if Senator Avery and I might reach an accord. What I have to do in these first opportunities to speak is to make it clear where my opposition is centered. I'm not trying to take from Senator Avery what his intent is. Senator Avery, if this bill were to be restricted to cities and we leave out villages, school districts, public power districts, and other political subdivisions, would you still want the bill? I'm asking him a question if he'll yield, Mr. President.
Senator
I will
Avery,
yield.
would you yield to a question?
I will yield. The answer to your question is I would like to keep cities, villages, and school districts in, but I'd be willing to concede on power districts and other subdivisions.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It was stated by you that this bill was put on this morning so that there could be some decompression from yesterday. I don't know why that would be necessary. When we come to this legislature, we know all kinds of things can happen, all kinds of things do happen, but that doesn't mean we alter our course. At least that's the case with me. So my vision is as clear today. My political eyes possess the same acuity today that they had yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. And the questions I'm raising now are not being raised for the first time here. When was this bill put before the public, if you are aware?
Last year. And it failed. Do you mind if I comment on why I think it failed?
Not at all.
I think it failed because the ballot was crowded and there was a certain element of ballot fatigue on the part of the voters. And I can assure you, sir, that we have agreed, people who support this in the private sector, that we will do it right this time. We'll raise the necessary money. We'll get hired professionals who know how to win ballot issues, and we'll win it.
Senator Avery, if you were an attorney and you took a client's case and you guaranteed an outcome, you would be in violation of your ethics because you can't do that. But being a politician, we're allowed puffery, we're allowed overstatement, we're allowed hyperbole. But on what basis do you say that you know it will pass if you hire these professionals and raise money when they are not the only ones who will be voting for this?
Because there's a right way and a wrong way to do campaigns. The right way usually wins. I can't guarantee that it will win, but I think it will. I've spent a good deal of my time in the political arena, not as a candidate, but working on campaigns. I think I know a little bit about what it takes to win, and it takes skilled people doing it the right way with the right amount of money.
Do you agree, Senator Avery, that you're going to still be addressing the voting public?
Yes.
Do you think that between the last time they voted and the time they'll vote this time, if it gets on the ballot, their intelligence and understanding are going to rise measurably?
Well, I'm not sure the electorate will change very much, but I think the campaign will change. And people's minds can be changed.
You're going to be appealing to the same people. What approach will be offered this time that was not offered last time? If you know, or if that's secret, then you don't have to tell me.
No. I think a statewide media campaign is necessary involving television.
And they'll say, vote for this, and the public is going to vote for it based on that?
If it's done right, there's a good chance, yes.
I'm going to listen to the discussion further because this is my third time, but I'll prepare an amendment or two to see how much we can get done here. Then maybe I will consent to let the bill move forward, and then we'll discuss it further. But that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. President. Hankinen. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I would like to make a proposal to Senator Avery as a step. But I've got to ask him a question first.
Senator Avery, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Avery, on page 1 of your proposal, in lines 14 and 15, beginning with the word public at the end of line 14, it says, public power districts and other political subdivisions. Senator Avery, in addition to cities, villages, and school districts, what other political subdivisions are embraced by that language?
Fire protection districts, a number of them. If you want to strike that language with an amendment, I will not oppose it.
So here's what my first amendment would consider doing, striking the words public power districts and other political subdivisions. And that's all I will ask you at this point. I don't want to try to get an ironclad commitment from Senator Avery yet. I will offer the amendment, discuss it. There may be people with an interest in leaving public power districts and other political subdivisions in this proposal, but they would probably be outside the chamber and they don't have a vote. I'm inside. I have a vote and a voice, and my voice shall not be stilled. But this is not one of those kind of issues that will excite anybody's emotion, and many people may not even be able to maintain enough interest to follow the discussion. But I think it is a very serious one. Public power districts, if they handle public money, in my opinion, are not in the same category as a city where the membership can be of the city council can be voted out. This public power district is an entity that's providing a commodity to large areas of this state, to many people, households, businesses in this state. So I think there's a justification in not lumping them with all these other entities unless it's for the purpose of restricting what they can do. If we're going to restrict them along with everybody else, I have no problem with that. But when we're going to expand what they can do, and we have not studied. Did you say time, Mr. President? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the legislature. What this amendment would do as a start toward pruning this proposition is to strike from this provision on pages 1 and 2 the following words: public power districts and other political subdivisions. Members of the legislature, my colleague, Senator Ernie Stootman, disappointed me yesterday, but I'm over that. He disappoints me today. He said that the public, which already rejected this very thing that they knew the legislature put on the ballot, is going to say, oh, well, if the senator whose work product we rejected comes out and talks to me face to face, then I will change my mind. Senator Stootman, I think the people in your district are as law-abiding as those in any other district. But I think the Frankenstein syndrome would come into play. If they knew Senator Stootman was going to appear, they would be out there with pitchforks, clubs, and torches and baying hounds to run him out of that town. Now, when have you ever seen anybody in the public say, we trust the senators so much that if they talk to us, they will change our mind? The joking that they make about us is that whenever we're in session, everybody runs for cover because the legislature is in session. I think those jokes are ill-advised. They are not accurate, but the public is entitled to think whatever they want to about us, and they're allowed to say it. When I say entitled, I mean they are free to do it. They are not entitled if that term means that they are informed because they don't know anything about the legislature. Poor Senator Stootman. It's good that we maintain our idealism, and I have a bit of it too, but I know how and when to keep it in check. Senator Stootman, the public that you want to go talk to and persuade that they ought to do what we tell them to do is the public that voted for term limits. Now, these people who hate us so much that they said 2 terms is all we can tolerate, then get out. You're going to go to them and say, do what we tell you to do. They say, that's exactly why we don't want you there. They don't even have to know what you're saying. Senator Stootman, the public is not well informed. It may have been Alexander Hamilton who said, the public are a great beast, bridled, saddled, and waiting to be ridden. Now, he was a bit more blunt than politicians will be today, but that is not too far from factual. When Senator Stootman, in his naivete, and isn't there something somewhat charming about that, even if it's a bit quaint, in 2007, he goes with his colleagues who feel very confident that the public trusts us. We would like a salary increase. No. Well, maybe they didn't understand, so this time we're going to put more money into it. We would like a salary increase. No, no. Well, now the World Herald, the biggest newspaper in the state, is going to write an editorial in favor of it. The Chamber of Commerce is going to support it. A rogue minister or two is going to support it. A person who wants to run for the legislature is going to support it. That's when they say, and I quote from that song by Miss Tunstall, no, 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 no. What don't you understand about no? Now, you mean to tell me that you're going to confront a hostile group like that, present a proposal like this, and they're going to accept it? One thing they might ask you is a question raised by one of my colleagues. If you have a small city or a small village, and Senator Loudon, if they happen to have a bit of extra change laying around, what do they know about investing? Where is the expertise? And if with the little bit of money that they may have that's available, are they going to hire an investment expert? Are they going to go to some broker and wind up themselves broker? We should eliminate the villages also. If this thing is going to go forward, to let the public see that some part of its message was received, and we don't know what that really is, Senator Stootman, in all seriousness. We don't really know why the public does what it does, except that they can. We should limit this to cities of the metropolitan class and cities of the first class. No villages came asking for this. No cities asked for it. The only reason Omaha got involved is they saw a chance to jump on a wagon that they didn't even know existed. But since it's out there and it's already moving, they're going to take advantage of it. But I will concede this much to those who want this and think it's wise. And that doesn't mean I'll vote for it. You saw that happen yesterday. Senator Flood offered an amendment, but he still worked very assiduously to defeat the bill. So the mere fact that somebody offers an amendment does not bind the person to vote for that proposal. It's designed to say that if you feel you must do this, then the form that is more desirable will be the form that exists after the adoption of an amendment. Senator Avery has more or less agreed to this one, but as I stated when we were in our bantering stage, that was not an ironclad commitment by him. I wanted to have the amendment drafted on the machine, which I call the gadget, so people can see exactly what it is. He will have time to consider if that is his position. And then I will attempt to do additional things to this proposal, but in manifesting some collegiality, some togetherness, I will reserve the remainder of my amendments for select file. And those amendments would be designed to remove villages and school districts. And substitute for all this other verbiage, cities of the metropolitan class, cities of the first class. If a first-class city obtained enough population to fall into the metropolitan class, then that city's interest would still be maintained. If a city just below the first class procured enough population, it would move into the first class. But these cities have sufficient size and sufficient wherewithal so that the legislature might have a bit more comfort in allowing them to just go out there in the open market and hire somebody who says, I'm prudent, and take a bath. Here's the only thing that happens when you have an investor. If the investor does not behave prudently, you don't recover what you lost. Now, if some of you all think that, then you are stone crazy. You might try to do something against the investor, but you are not going to recover what you lost. If that investor had invested in the dot-com bubble and it burst and everything was gone, you're not going to get what you lost back from that investor. So simply putting in the terminology, and I fought to have it put in last time, something referring to the prudent person, that doesn't mean that the one selected will indeed be prudent. And it does not mean that that person's best and honest judgment will turn out to be prudent in terms of doing that which protects the interests of the people whose welfare is affected by the way this money is handled. So right now, the only amendment I have is to eliminate public power districts and other political subdivisions. And I will answer any questions you want to ask me about my amendment or any other parts of the bill, because I am familiar with it, and although it's mine, I think I can probably answer questions. Even if you had one to offer Senator Avery, ask me. My answer might be different, but I'll answer it nevertheless. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. You have heard the opening on FA 48 offered by Senator Chambers to LR 6CA.
Do you think that the voters will accept it? Do you think the voters are going to be informed enough that they will pass it the second time? Or do you think that they're going to just say no again?
If they perceive whatever's presented as the same thing as last time, I believe they'll vote the same way. What I'm saying is that those who are going to conduct the campaign that Senator Avery is talking about would be able to say these things were eliminated. If those were the problems because there were entities you didn't think should have this, and it's been restricted to cities, the larger cities, maybe they'll go for it. I still don't think they will.
That's a concern that I have because to me it seems like when you bring something back and it's got possibility the same title, it's up to the group that is promoting it, or maybe the senators, if they have trust of the people, to bring that information to the people of what the difference is and what made it better. Then it may have a possibility. But I think if we take the same thing back to the people, they're going to say no again. I think I do agree with Senator Shemmick when she states, people need to be educated. And that is the reason that I said that the senators, the members on the body here, the members of the body, need to educate the people as to what that bill or that constitutional amendment means, because we are the people that have hopefully thought it through enough and made a good decision to put it out to the people. And I think that demands our time to do that. I would like to ask Senator Chambers another question, please.
Senator Chambers, would you yield?
Yes, I will.
Senator Chambers, do you feel that our constituents out there in the community have trust in the senators?
I think most of them don't even know who their senator is, being quite frank. I believe there are others who think that we have gone off to Washington, D.C., and when we ask for a salary increase, they think we're making too much anyway. So I really cannot speak with certitude about what happens with reference to any particular senator and his or her constituents.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. I will agree with you, Senator Chambers, that there are times when people think that we're a senator, we go to Washington. I know there's times that people are said, well, are you in Washington?
The reason I want to use my time, I want to comment on a couple of things that have been said by other senators. And the reason I'm not going to continue too much on this bill, I will have a few more comments. I had said if this amendment is adopted, I will not stand in the way of the bill advancing, but I will still continue to work on it. Senator Carlson was the speaker who spoke most recently, and I'd like to comment about something he said. Not paraphrasing or quoting, he gave his view of what prudent investing would consist of. But not all investors would follow the same course, the same mixture, even put together the same portfolio that Senator Carlson would, yet both of them, when you look at where he or she may be coming from, could be deemed to be a prudent investor, because there's not one single proper way to invest in a prudent manner. And then all of them may fail because you're guessing, you're gambling, you're hoping, you're praying. But as the song said, Senator Carlson, all you're wishing and hoping and singing and praying ain't going to make any, is not going to make any difference if things don't pan out the way you hope they will, and there are things beyond your control. Unless you're an insider on Wall Street and can manipulate some things that will benefit you and some friends, but ordinarily speaking, you're not going to control those market forces. So, Senator Carlson gave us an idea of the way a prudent investor may proceed, but no investor in the real world may choose to do it that way, and yet would be considered prudent. Who's going to watch the watcher? The watcher is the investor. If you're in a small community and you put your trust in this person, how do you know? How do you know how to judge? And if the investor commits fraud and steals all the money, you're not going to get it back. People think that they can go to the government, I suppose, in the way that if you have a bank account insured up to $100,000 and something happens, that money is insured and you'll get up to that $100,000. That's not going to happen here. You lose, and that's it. Senator Shimmick had asked, would I be opposed to a sit-down discussion between General and Select? She didn't tell me General's last name. She didn't tell me Select's last name. So I don't know what this sit-down discussion between General and Select would consist of. I'd have to know more about the characters involved. But if they have the same approach that some of my colleagues in the legislature would have, I'd say instead of a sit-down discussion, we need a knock-down, drag-out, because this really is a serious matter that we're dealing with. The policy is very important. Senator Stootman and others from different points of view talked about how to educate the public. Senator Avery gave his idea of how you could put together a campaign. Senator Gay didn't use the term slick when he's describing the campaign, but I would sum up what he said with the word slick. By having a slick campaign, you make the approach and appeal to people that seems to work, and that does not involve actually educating and informing them. You don't have time for that. Your ads cannot do that. They've got to be quick. They've got to catch people. If you watch the little guy called Gecko, you'll hear him say, well, Governor, you got to catch the people's attention in the first 10 seconds. Maybe quicker than that.
1 minute.
And that's all you're going to have, if that, especially when it's clearly a political issue, and that's what this will be. When it comes on the television and the final is a box with an X in it and it says yes, then the public generally says, I'm going to mark no. Anybody who comes to me like that can't be trusted. No. And I have a few more things to say when I close. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And Mr. President, members of the legislature, and Senator Carlson, I'm very familiar with these employees. But that particular story was the kind that is woven to make a point. I would like to ask Senator Carlson a question, because he does understand investing.
Senator Carlson, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Carlson, that first person had 5 talents and gave the original 5 plus 5. Now, what growth does that represent, percentage-wise? 100%.
100%, yes.
What stock do you know of that you can invest in and get 100% return on your stock?
There would be many of them. It's just a matter of time.
So if you invest $100, you're going to get back $100.
Depends on the time.
Do you know of some stock that operated like that over time? You had said something like 15% return is aggressive investing.
Yes, it is.
So we're talking about 100% return. I think that's unbelievable, unless you're gambling.
Oh, no, this is not gambling. All you need is time, and that's what these endowments are about. There's time involved. You've got to have time available, or it is not a prudent investment. So we're talking about time here. I think this employer was gone quite a bit of time.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. He took a journey. He probably picked a very nice person with whom he'd like to spend some time and travel to an out-of-the-way place where he could have a little R&R. Then he came back. But he said to that one who did bury it and give it back, "You knew I was a hard man. You knew it. And yet you behaved in this fashion." There are two ways to look at it. If you know somebody is very hard in the way they judge, should you risk what you were given to be a steward over and possibly lose it and face the wrath of this hard person? Or say, at least I held you harmless? So there would be more than one way to look at that story. But I very seriously doubt that you are going to find any legitimate stock in which you can invest and get a return of 100%. Now, where you can get several hundred percentage points of return is when it comes to exploiting young football players at these football factories, give the small amount of money that is allowed under NCAA rules for scholarship, room, and board, and then look at the millions that they bring in. So when you can get return in the millions of dollars on an investment of a few thousands of dollars, that is the kind of investment everybody would like to make. But the ones who generate that money cannot get any of it. Now, in the book where Senator Carlson read his example, it also said, "Muzzle not the ox that treadeth out the corn." If the ox is doing that work, let the oxen eat or be rewarded. The workman is worthy of his hire. If somebody is working, pay a fair wage. But those things don't happen in the real world. Something else was said about the educating of the public. The schools are the ones who should educate the public. Now, on a specific issue such as one of these that we're talking about, the legislators who support it would have that obligation. But the schools have the responsibility to let students know that a member of the Nebraska unicameral legislature goes to the State House, which is located in Lincoln, Nebraska, not Washington, D.C.
1 minute.
That there's a difference between a state senator and a U.S. senator. Now, you can ask some of these people who don't know where we go when we leave, what do we do? And they say, I don't know. But if you don't know, you shouldn't even be there. You ought to quit and go home. That's the attitude they often take toward members of the legislature. But we take decisions every day that affect the lives, the welfare, even the fortunes, if there be people who have that much that it can be called a fortune. People ought to be made aware while they're in school of what it is that we do. And then maybe we would get different people willing to come here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Seeing no other lights on wishing to speak, Senator Chambers, you are recognized to close on FA 48.
Thank you. Mr. President, having addressed all the issues that I wanted to, all I'm going to do is remind the body what is before us. This amendment would strike from this proposal to amend the Constitution the words public power districts and other political subdivisions. Senator Shimmick and others have gotten together, and I've agreed to meet with them between now and when this bill appears on select file to see what can be done. And what would make me cease to oppose the bill is to get rid of the villages and the school districts. Remember, it was brought to us by Lincoln. Lincoln didn't even care about this. Nobody, Senator Gay, cared about this, and nobody offered it. And the only reason Lincoln did, Senator Beitler, who at that time worked for the city of Lincoln, also seeking grants and other benefits for the city. So it was very narrow in its sweep. If Lincoln had not had the sale of a public hospital and the proceeds enter a foundation, it would not have come to us from Lincoln. This is not activity being engaged in all around the state where this kind of change in the Constitution is needed. It's for one city that had one project. One city with one project, and we're going to amend the Constitution, and we're going to include villages, public power districts, and other political subdivisions, and none of them has a reason to want this bill. But if you go to them and say, look, we've got something where you might be able to double your money, you know they're going to go for it. Why do all these scams work? Because they're spun to people who are desperate. And these people are made to think that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and I have the map that will take you to the pot of gold, even if the rainbow itself should dissipate before you get there. Follow this map. But you have to give me something first. And what you give is what you lose, and you get nothing. We need to stop presenting these chimeras, these will-o'-the-wisps, to these political subdivisions who weren't even thinking about this. They are functioning as well, I guess, as they need to be, not as well as people would like them to. Without this, this thing failed on the ballot last year. Not one political subdivision, not even Lincoln, can say that they were substantially or substantively even harmed. So if this amendment is adopted and the debate on the matter continues, I'll have a few more things to say, but I'm not going to offer any more amendments at this time, and I will not impede the movement of the bill, even though I don't think it's a wise policy. Thank you, Mr. President, and I will ask for a call of the House, and I will accept the machine vote.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
45 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. President, on adoption of the amendment.
The amendment is adopted.
Mr. President, colleagues, Senator Fulton, I'm conflicted on this bill. I have listened, and the arguments are persuasive. I'm 95% persuaded. However, suppose there were a person on the moon who had an unregulated device which could make telephone calls any place on the earth. I think we need to take that into consideration. Who can say at some time in the future that will not be the case? I mean, you can't be too careful. So if we are going to regulate what happens in federal elections, shouldn't we be concerned about this idea too? Now, I'm listening, but I'm greatly conflicted. I'm 95% of the way there, but I just can't support this. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, in order to show how ridiculous and preposterous something is, an argument should not be made, but a mirror or reflective surface should be held up to throw back at the one who made the preposterous notion, throw it right back at him or her. Then it becomes clear. Senator Fulton is staring at me for some reason, which I don't mind. My job on the floor of the legislature, as I perceive it, is to address the issues that I think are worthy of being addressed. A person can offer any reason or excuse for doing or not doing a certain thing. And I would not want to take away from anybody the right to do that. However, I will respond and react to it. That's the nature of the work that we do on the floor of the legislature, and that's what makes our job interesting. And it might sometimes caution us to proceed carefully and think through what we're saying and see whether or not that is the principle which is going to be applied to every bill that comes before us. Now, we know it has been stated that a slavish consistency is the hobgoblin of small or little minds. So a slavish consistency may not always be the thing that is wanted. But a certain logical consistency, a certain philosophical consistency is different. That kind of consistency is based on a person having thought and cogitated. And when that's going on, the face will assume an expression as intense and intent as that of my young friend, Senator Fulton. And when a consistency is found in that regard, it's based on the idea that similar facts and circumstances result in a similar outcome. By the same token, if the same course is pursued, then it is not logical to expect a different outcome. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about what I want to talk about, as I always do. And having said what I wanted to say, I am through. I am now, after having listened to myself, persuaded 99 44/100% to support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, you are recognized to open on your amendment to the committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, if you look on the first page of the committee amendment in line 12, you will see language telling when these calls can be made without running afoul of the law. Disseminated between the hours of 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. I would restrict it even further by saying, after the word "and," insert the following: 4 p.m., comma, and 6 p.m., and. This is how it would read. Disseminated between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. That would leave a 2-hour period during which these calls could not be made. The complaints that I've heard most that people give, in addition to the general annoyance, is that the calls often are made and seem to be timed for when a family or an individual may be sitting down to eat dinner. So for people who engage in that activity, not only can we say the family that prays together stays together, maybe the family that eats together meets together and stays together. So if this amendment gives Senator Shimmick any problem whatsoever, I will withdraw it. But I'm wanting to make a point. There should be some times when an individual or a family can be free of these types of intrusions. When you have a telephone, it could be said that you're inviting anybody else who has a telephone to enter your premises by way of that telephone. You can answer it, you can refuse to answer it, and let it ring and ring and ring until the caller chooses to hang up. But simply because something can be done due to the technology and a person taking advantage of it does not mean that it ought to be done. So there should be some periods of time other than very early in the morning or late at night when you are free from this kind of activity. It is not commercial speech, and I think that ought to be limited too, but we're not talking about that. Hustlers for charities or anybody else ought to know that there are certain times of the day only when they can do this kind of activity, invade a person's premises, and not be afoul of the law. They say that a man's home is his castle. No, they should say a person's home is his or her castle. You know what makes a man's home a castle, Senator Aguilar, rather than a dungeon or an Old Bailey or reading jail? The company of somebody who means a great deal to you. That can convert a cave into a delightsome place to be. I'm going to ask Senator Shimmick a question, and her answer will determine how much further I proceed with this.
Senator Shimmick, would you yield to a question?
Certainly.
Senator Shimmick, I'm going to make the question as easy for you to answer as possible. Would you prefer that I not proceed with this amendment?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Shimmick.
Even though I'm in full sympathy with what you're saying and what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Senator Shimmick. As a man who responds more to directness than sympathy, I'm going to accept that first word, which was no, and strike what followed from the record as being unresponsive to the question. Mr. President, I withdraw that pending amendment.
Amendment 49.
But in this case, I think you and I are together in saying that whichever form would be taken, if we have the word only following shall, or we strike it there and place it after disseminated, it would be clear what is intended. But I'm letting you know what my almost compulsive urge is, so that you will, on this score, extend a bit of sympathy to me, as I think you already have. But I'm not going to offer an amendment, and I will not discuss the bill further at this point. But I want to ask you another question, then I'm through.
Okay.
And you don't even have to answer it. Everything is in your hands. Did you understand to what, to which, to whom, and to when I was referring when I first began to talk?
No.
About the system on the moon that might do certain things?
No, I didn't. I didn't get it at all, Senator.
Sister Shimmick, do you believe in telling the truth?
Yes.
Sister Shimmick, are you telling the truth now?
Yes.
The whole truth?
Yes.
And nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Do you know where all fibbers shall have their parts?
Where
I'll
what?
tell you about that off the mic. Thank you, Mr. President.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
26 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of committee amendments.
Committee amendments are adopted.
31 ayes, no nays on the motion to advance the bill, Mr. President.
LB 190. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. LB 198 does advance.